doesn't matter. We won't get into all that. Hey, Rob,
Yeah.
how are you?
Well, let's get started. I don't think Lisa, you did send me a CV.
You don't have to do that. People know me. That's fine.
That's
I'm a retired diagnostic pathologist, and I became very passionate about climate change and joined CCL about a decade ago. I've done every imaginable role in CCL. And then, like many people who are on this call, I started a state affiliate to the consortium. And and there we go. And I've loved En-ROADS, but I want to introduce Laura Iyer, who's here, who is one of three founders of the En-ROADS engagement action team. And if you guys are not familiar with it, it is an incredible way to learn about En-ROADS. They know it inside and out. So she's here as my wing person to make sure that when we get into questions that are over my head, we have Laura here. So I think we should all welcome her. And what tell me about your background, Laura, again.
My background is I'm a aerospace engineer, and I used to work in there several years. But I married a physician, so I'm in a medical field, and then I've been working with him in his office for the past 15 years or so. So, and he's a retina specialist, and I think he's on the line. He's the Doc iPhone guy on here.
Hi, Doc iPhone.
Mohan Iyer.
You're married to a very wonderful and excellent leader, and we're very grateful for her. So
Lisa starts. There are several people on here that I don't think are members of the CCL Health Action Team, and we would love for you to be. We can't sign you up. You have to go to community and go to the Health Action Team, and then it drops down and asks you if you want to sign up. So we would love to have you join us. There's no obligations, and most people just sort of read the forums and occasionally come to the monthly calls, but we'd love to have you. And so Lisa also is, I think, her state CCL person, and she's been a liaison for a religiously active liaison for many, many years. So we'll let you take over, Lisa.
That's terrific, and welcome everybody. Yeah, I'm doing less and less in CCL right now, not because I don't love CCL, but just because I need to take a little bit better care of myself for a little while. So that's what I'm doing. Again, a big congratulations to Lori and Rob for their work with Montana. I'm going to call it Children's Trust Fund, but that isn't exactly what it's called. Tell me, what's it called? But let's all congratulate them for the trial that passed in Montana, which is the beginning of
trust. Held
our
versus
trust.
Yeah, Held versus Montana is the case.
And that is huge, huge, huge. And
can we do a hip hip hooray or a huzzah or something? I mean, this deserves more than an emoji.
Agree. It is huge. It is really huge.
And Robin came up and spent the entire week at the trial. She was supporting Lee Van Susteren, and yeah, it was great to have Robin here.
Way to go, Robin! Congratulations on that.
I just sat there.
That's all right. You were being supporting. You were supporting. I'm sure there was a lot behind that. And then she was also the champion of the month for the consortium this month. And she's also the founder of the Climate Psychiatry Alliance. So many things to congratulate you. Okay, today we're supposed to talk about En-ROADS. I hear I'm sort of garbled. So when I'm garbled, I could do it one of two ways, but maybe the better way, I was going to actually go through a PowerPoint that I put together, and I have no idea why I'm garbled. I normally am never garbled. So here we are. I must have hit something on my computer or done something. So I was actually going to show you a PowerPoint and go through it, but I also have the recording the of the thing that I did. It takes about 28 minutes, and maybe we could hear it better if I just showed the recording of the previous one. It's told for a slightly different audience, but afterwards we could kind of dig in from the health perspective. So let me see if I can get that going and see what you guys think about that. I'll get it started. There are a couple things that you'll notice about it. One, I talk about the number of deaths due to air pollution. Well, first let me say, can you guys hear me okay?
Mhm.
Or would you prefer a tape?
We can hear you.
Hey,
You're pretty clear now, Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah. Just don't move too much and you'll be fine.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to try the PowerPoint to start with. And I'm going to share my screen. And we'll start just by talking through this. And Laura, again, is my backup person with this. So I'm sharing my screen and I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint and I'm going to start from the beginning, and you guys can tell me, can you shake your head? Let me just get it going. Can you see it? Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Yeah,
Yes.
great. Thanks,
Yes.
Laura. Okay, so a big thank you to everybody. And what we're going to talk about today is MIT's Climate Interactive En-ROADS. This is a systems dynamic model that was produced at MIT in partnership with Climate Interactive. It's a global model, so I want to emphasize that it's a global model and not specific to the US, and it's not specific to any state, but we can extrapolate and make some parallels from looking at it. It's calibrated against a whole suite of other climate policy models, and it uses the middle of the road emissions scenario from the IPCC. So you remember there's an SP1 and SP2 and an SP6 or an SP3 and anyhow, it's the middle of the road one. So just so you have some background, and I'm gonna show you real quickly what the actual thing looks like. This is the actual website. It was just updated in June of 2023 with a bunch of new features, which I am not familiar with, but Laura here is familiar with them. So if things, if we go a little awry or get stuck on things, she'll pop in and just make sure we're all clear on things. But what I want to, and you can ask questions as we go along, but just to give you an overview of the model, I just want to emphasize the fact that on the left-hand side, we're looking at our energy supply between 2000 and 2100. This is the area under the curve, but there's a whole variety of ways that you can look at it. Sometimes it's easier to look at, this in a linear fashion. There's a variety of other things we'll go through that you can look at as well. On the right, this curve that we have up, that we're going to focus on here is the net greenhouse gas emissions, again, between 2000 and 2100. And then this is the average global temperature increase that's projected out to 2100 for the middle of the road scenario. And then what you do underneath is a whole bunch of levers here that you can move to the left or to the right to simulate a variety of different things that we may want to model. So we're going to go through a variety of these either changing the energy supply or changing, so kind of the supply or the demand or a variety of other things that we can look at as well. But we're going to focus on things that affect our health. So just to bring home a little bit about why we have confidence in the model, it has been evaluated against a whole host of other policy, systemic or whatever they call them, systems dynamic modeling techniques. And you can just basically see that the En-ROADS is kind of right there in the middle of the average of a variety of other graphs. So there's a lot of reason to have confidence in it beyond just the fact that it's MIT. So when Laura asked me to present this, she wanted me to present it as if we're at a library and we were trying to engage with the general public in a way that was a little bit different. And so we were going to do it from a health perspective and bringing that old phrase that we in this group use a lot, that is that climate solutions are health solutions. We know from our work with CCL that, you know, if you focus only on the impacts, people tend to shut down and don't listen to the messaging. But if you can show the ways in which addressing climate change can actually do good things, and for us it's an easy message, improve health, then you know, people tend to listen a little bit better. So you know, just to jump right to it, do we have an example in which a climate solution is a health solution? And, you know, one thing that I think a lot of us are talking about is electrifying the transportation system. So how would you model electrifying the transportation system using En-ROADS? So again, I'm going to go right over to the En-ROADS platform, and we'll look at how we do that. So you see there's a variety of different things that you can do, but here under transportation, you can model electrification. And if you want to know really what you're talking about when you say that we're electrifying, you can hit the 3 dots and it allows you to really get into the weeds. And if you want to know more about it, you hit this little I, the information, and I'm going to pop it out so you can really look at it. And then this tells you kind of a lot of information about it. You know, what are we talking about when we're electrifying it? We're investing in electric vehicle charging and research and development and batteries. And, you know, you can look at the whole host of things, but basically electrifying the transportation system. And often if you go down, there's a bunch of other things that, you know, it improves air quality and there are equity concerns. And there's a variety of things that are explained here. So now if I go back to what does it really look like when you do electrify, what I want us to look at is a variety of things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this again over to that linear view because I think it's a little bit easier to look at. If we electrify the transportation, let's say we have a magic wand and we can, you know, maximally electrify, we turn it over as far as we can, what happens? Well, maybe not as much as you would think happens. We do decrease our net greenhouse gas emissions, but not a ton. If we toggle it back and forth, what we see, let's look at these different lines. Our renewables go up. Our oil goes down because we've electrified. And interestingly enough, and let me do it one more time, look at the brown line, that's a coal. It doesn't change a whole lot, but it does go up. And if it goes up, then you might say, well, what is the health consequences of that? If we go to impacts, we can actually model that. And you can look at air pollution. So air pollution from energy, and what they're really talking about is PM 2.5. And you'll see if you electrify, just electrify, don't do anything to change your energy supply, your air pollution will actually go up, which is not what any of us would anticipate. So let's delve into that a little bit further. What does this mean? Well, the key with this is that we have to electrify or decarbonize our grid. We have to change the energy supply in the electric grid that's charging electric energies. If we don't, we're actually going to increase air pollution. And these slides are borrowed from Dana Noccicelli, which I think most of you guys probably know. Looking at, you know, this would be our baseline coal consumption without the IRA. This is what it is if at the current rate of building out transmission lines, we actually would be consuming more coal. That's why the particulates go up. But if we increase the rate of our transmission lines and decarbonize our electric grid system, we can get the coal out of the system. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. That brings up one of the big policy points, which is permitting reform and why CCL supports that. So I'll go over this really quickly. We know that the IRA has the potential to electrify, you know, to get about 85% of our electricity from wind and solar, along with battery storage. And this will, you know, lead to solar and wind projects exploding across the country, hopefully, due to the IRA. Now, there are two things that are making that build out really difficult. One is local opposition, often fueled by misinformation on social media, where siting projects are having trouble being approved. That's a big deal in Michigan, but I would guess it's a big deal in many other places. It's a place that the health voice can really make a big difference. The other thing is the rate at which we're building out transmission lines. So we need to build them out more quickly, and that's according to the Princeton's repeat model that basically said if we don't speed the rate of which we build out our transmission lines, we're likely to realize only 20% of the emission reductions that are promised by the IRA. And so instead of building it out at about 1% per year, we need to do it more like 3% per year. And so that's the reason why CCL is focused on that as one of the policy agendas. If we look at the number of projects that currently are under, are waiting in a queue to be approved for permitting rules, you'll see that the majority of them are actually solar, storage, and wind. There is some natural gas, and really other projects are pretty low. So CCL says it wants. Yep.
Do you have any idea how that compares to the permitting of oil and gas refineries?
Yeah, so this is all comers. And so this is gas right here, Robin.
Yeah.
And I think oil is within this group right here.
Uh-huh.
So you can see that almost everything is.
Uh-huh.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
And can you clarify what's green versus blue there?
I think if I remember correctly, and I'd have to go back and look at it, I think I'd have to go back and look, but I have a feeling, and Laura, tell me if you remember, but I think what the blue is probably, I'd have to go back and look. One of them, I think, is like things that are sitting in the queues, maybe something that's been approved and not formally built out. I would guess that might be this, but I'd have to go back and look at the whatever it's called, the little template, and I just don't have it on me right here. So Lisa, I will look at that and get back to you.
Lisa, this is Lee. Does this come from one of Dana's presentations?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It does.
Lisa, this says projects are delayed by current permitting rules. How would we think about gas and oil that are not delayed, that are actually getting speedily put through the permitting process?
I'm not sure that I understand the question exactly.
Okay.
I mean, I do understand that with permitting reform, and there's been some effort, especially with, Manchin, to expedite, some of the natural gas, but I can't tell you, I think this is overall all of the projects. We could go back and look more carefully at Dana's stuff. I honestly haven't looked at it in about 5 or 6 months, to be honest.
The point
I've done more homework before this. Sorry.
But the point I'm making is the slide that you indicate shows delays in permitting. And I'm wondering if oil and gas are expedited and not delayed. It may not be apparent in the graph, but that's behind my question.
Okay, that's good. And Lee has something to add to that. Lee Alley, you read multiple articles this week that claim that gas pipeline permitting takes half as long due to streamlined review process of the FERC agency. And again, I'm no expert in permitting reform. I've been trying to focus on health stuff. I boned up on it about 6 or 9 months ago and now have forgotten a big part of it. But Lee, do you know the answer or want to add something?
I'm going to try to find the exact citation, and if I can, I'll post a link in the chat.
Okay. I wanted to bring it up here in part because I know that a lot of us who are really busy on the health stuff are less familiar with what the other parts of the policy agendas were and why CCL is kind of thinking about some of them. And so I just wanted to kind of whet our appetites. And if you go to the policy agenda section on CCL, they have done CCU after CCU after CCU on permitting reform. I think it's pretty complicated, honestly. And Lee, if you can find that, that would be terrific. All for that. So good questions. What I have, my understanding of what CCL will support is they won't support a specific piece of legislation until they've read the text of it. But in general, they recognize that we need to add to the rate of which we're building out clean electricity projects and agree with speeding up the approval of them. But also believe that it's really important for communities to have their voices heard. So that's one example of a health solution that's a climate solution, electrifying. And I just wanted to bring home the fact that it's more complicated than it looks on the surface, and that just electrifying by itself does not necessarily clean up the air. It's also important to decarbonize the grid as well. So let's look at another one, which is walking and biking to work, and think about, how would you model that using En-ROADS? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the En-ROADS model here, and we're going to take a look at it. And so where you'd find walking and biking to work and how you'd model it is actually under energy efficiency. Am I sharing my screen?
No.
Let me share my screen. That would work a hell of a lot better. Sorry, you guys. Okay, can you guys see this? Can you see it now?
We can see it.
Okay. You guys speak up. So under energy efficiency, it's right here. If we hit the 3 dots, this is where we look at it, and we can go under the I and pop it out again. And basically energy efficiency is basically people walking and biking to work, or public transportation, or carpooling, anything that's essentially, improving efficiency. It's not the term I would have thought of right off the top of my head, but it does make sense that that would be improving the efficiency of our transportation system. So if we go and we look at that right here under energy efficiency, and we say, okay, let's build out our walkable and bikeable worlds. What would happen to our supply mix? Let's take a look at that and really pay attention here. And if we move our lever as far over to the right, look what happens. I'm going to toggle it back and forth. And, it's pretty impressive that the amount of energy we need really comes down. And then we can say, well, what happens to air pollution again? Go back and look at that specifically. And it comes down a little bit if more people walk and bike. So we know that walking and biking is a more healthy activity in and of itself. It will also reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and it will help to clean up the air. So that's a win-win. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. Everybody seeing the PowerPoint? Let me just
yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So what's another example of a climate solution that's a health solution? Well, how about electrifying our homes and increasing energy efficiency there? And you guys can probably talk about this better than I can, but we certainly know that it's better to electrify, cook our foods with electricity or induction stove than it is with natural gas. We know it improves, it's better to make our homes more insulated and to heat if we can, and cool with heat pumps. And we certainly know that that's important to do for indoor air quality in our homes, but it's also important to consider decarbonizing our building and industry sectors, including our own hospital systems, which I know many of us are involved with right now, and happy for us to talk about that in more detail. But let's look first at En-ROADS and kind of see how we would model that. So here's your building and industry over here. And the second tag here is energy efficiency. And again, you can always go to the 3 dots and look at what they're talking about, and they're talking about building well-insulated homes and reducing the amount of energy that would be used through better insulation, etc. So let's go back up here if I can. And let's see if we can model that. I seem to be stuck. Why am I stuck? Sorry. Okay, so we're going to go to energy efficiency and we're going to move that lever to the right. And I want you to look at the graph on the left-hand side in terms, again, of energy supply and see what happens. And I'm sure you guys can all predict it. Boom. I think that's so impressive. It always just amazes me. Isn't it just amazing? So yeah, let's toggle back and forth. You know, we improve, you know, our insulation, et cetera, in our homes. And it's impressive. And then if we electrify on top of that, we can bring the temperature, we can bring it down a little bit further and improve the quality of air inside as well. Okay, I'm gonna try to get to that in a little bit. So let's go back to the discussion and see what else we can model using En-ROADS. And this, I went to Climate Interactive and said, well, okay, how do you model eating a vegetarian diet or a diet in which you eat almost no meat, you know, maybe occasionally on holidays. And this is how they explained it. You would have to toggle 3 different levers here. First of all, you know, if we're eating less meat, we can expect the methane and nitrous oxide from manure and fertilizer and grades to go down. And they estimated it would decrease by about 20%. And I'm just taking Climate Interactive at their word when they say that. They also say that we need to think about the fact that we would need less machinery, and we would transport the animals less because we're eating less meat, and we use less energy for processing. And they would say you toggle that lever, you're actually increasing the energy efficiency that way by decreasing the amount of transportation, et cetera. So you'd increase it 1.5%. And then
Lisa, will you show us the levers that you're
I will.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Lisa.
Yep, that's coming next.
Lisa?
Coming next. Yes.
Can I handle this one when you get there? Because
yeah,
they have updated this where they actually have a vegetarian diet lever at this point.
I didn't see it. Oh, that's funny. Okay, yes, please. I'll stop sharing and have you do it. Or can you can tell me how to do it,
sure,
whichever
I'll
you want
show you how to do it. It's easy.
Okay, great. And then the last part is deforestation. You don't have to, you know, basically cut down trees in order to have livestock. So let's go to the actual levers. And I actually had put this into the into the computer. But is this the old model?
Well, no, you did the things right. But if you go the 3 dots under deforestation, or go to a new slide, or go to a fresh, if you want to freshen it up, go back to baseline.
Okay, we'll go back to baseline. Here we are.
Okay. And then if you go go back under the 3 dots under deforestation.
Okay.
And then under detailed settings, set that underneath.
Yep. Here.
And then go down, and then you can say food from animals. And
right here.
Yep. And if you click that little arrow to the side of it,
yeah,
you know, it's going to kind of tell you, you know, kind of what that means. And so they've really baked that into En-ROADS at this point.
Nice.
Yes.
So you can show, and then the second one down I really like too is food waste, but yeah,
that's cool.
But for health, well, I guess for both really, because food insecurity plays into health as well as a good vegetarian diet.
Yep.
So those are new features, brand new.
Oh, that is so cool. That's great. So we can play with that a little bit using these detailed settings, and I would encourage you guys to do that.
That said, Lisa, like what you had, the thing that I liked before that you did, it really, to me, crystallized why vegetarian diets, like it's not just the food, you know, it's not the land, but it's also the transportation, also the fuel. But this kind of already does it for you.
Puts that in there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. That's really helpful. It's so good to know that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go back to the other one, and I'll show you how you would have modeled it, though they now have this baked in one, so you don't have to. But again, basically with methane and other gases, what they had said is that you want to actually decrease. I had it 16, but they said 20%. So if you do that, it's there. And then they said, you know, energy efficiency, because you don't have to transport the animals, would go up 1.5%. And then deforestation right here, they said would go down 1.5%. But now that we have these cool levers here, you can do it without, you know, all the different ones separately. But there's modeling, you know, an almost complete vegan diet with just, or not vegan, but meatless diet with only occasional meat on a holiday. And then the last health solution that I often model would be essentially improving, you know, afforestation, building out trees. And, you know, I always emphasize, you know, how important it is. I won't go through all these slides to do it in urban areas and talk about the urban heat island effect and how when temperature goes up, ozone goes up. But this is how you model it, just so that you have a sense of that. Again, that is their lever here called afforestation, and you can move the lever to the right and model that. So the take-home point, though, there's one other big point that you know, is interesting to put together, and that is if you put all these healthy measures together, basically, you know, afforestation and changing your diet and improving energy efficiency, you know, you can get down to about 2.4%. And I can show that to you here. You can look at it actually on the model if you want to see it. And it hasn't changed a lot. You can even move your levers over more, and you're still right at about 2.4 degrees right here. Now, then the question is, well, what else, right? And we're CCLers, right? So we have one policy that we better doggone, you know, simulate, right? And that's putting a steadily increasing price on carbon. And the point I want you guys to keep with all those independent ones, we were at about 2.4 degrees. And if you model a carbon fee like the EACDA, you're at 2.3 degrees. That's without any of the other things. And I can show you how you model it. You know, again, $15 per ton, and it goes up. This one is going up $10 every year for 76 years to get to $75. And you get to 2.3. And then after that, you can start then decreasing, you know, changing your diet and planting trees and, you know, electrifying, etc. And you can actually get down to 1.5 degrees if you do the things together. But it really brings home the power of carbon pricing. So just in summary, you know, if we look at the policy agenda that CCL has right now, this is, you know, reducing emissions in half by 2030 is the goal according to the IPCC. So this is where we want to be by 2030. This is where we are. If we implement, this is where we are. And if we implement the IRA without increasing our rate of transmission lines, we can get to about 28%. And then if we, you know, build out our transmission lines more quickly, we can reduce it about 40% and we're not quite where we need to go. But you add that price on carbon and we can get to that 50% and then a little bit. And then you can add in healthy forests and building electrification. And we can we can do this. So I think that's really an optimistic story. You can play with it on En-ROADS and see that we can get there as well. And bottom line is, it's good for our health and it's good for climate. I just bring home Schindell's paper, which you guys are familiar with. And the take home is that climate solutions are health solutions. So that kind of gives you an idea of different ways to play with that. But let's just stop now, because that's just an overview. And not that I am any expert in En-ROADS, but thank goodness we have Laura here. And we can play with it a little bit more and kind of think about things a little bit more. Larry made the point of reference EVs can get cleaner over time. They had just purchased a Nissan Leaf in 2013. In Texas, the electricity generated for the year was 20% zero emissions, nuclear and wind, good. And in 2022, our grid was now 40%. That's, believe it or not, Texas is doing it, man, in terms of decarbonizing their grid, right? That's pretty cool. Good. Yeah, anything you want to add to that, Larry?
Yeah, no, I just making the point that, if we can do things in parallel, then, doing one thing and, and the electrification, all the other, electrify everything, that movement, I think, it might not yield the result right away, but as we do more and more, then, it's a big benefit. So even if you do electric buses and you get the big air quality improvement, but you don't get the emissions reductions right away, just keep driving them and then you will.
Yeah, and especially electric school buses. I think, the indoor air quality for the students is such a good, motivator, plus the length of time that the electric buses last and that sort of thing. Yeah, but you're right. We have to do it all. Joanne, what's your thoughts?
This was great. Thank you so much. I didn't realize that En-ROADS could look at air pollution in addition to temperature decrease. So it's good for me to relearn these things that I probably was supposed to already know. I have a little question and a bigger question. A little question. I'm on an advisory committee for my county's Clean Cities proposal, which is attempting to reduce transportation emissions. And so I was wondering if there's a public transportation lever where increasing public transportation, if you can look at that. So that's my little question.
So Laura, it may have changed, but under energy efficiency, that's where public transportation is embedded.
Okay, so moving that lever all the way to the right would include increased active transportation and public transportation.
Yeah, okay. Let me get out of this thing if I can figure out how to do that. Just a second. Sometimes computers are frustrating. I can't get out of it.
That's fine.
Stop sharing my screen.
I can look at that. It wasn't clear to me what that transportation efficiency meant.
Yeah, no,
my bigger question is sometimes, you're giving a talk on a certain thing like transportation or heat, and it takes some time for the public just to talk about kind of the overall health issues. So I'm wondering about your experience in bringing En-ROADS into a kind of broader public presentation. What's the minimum amount of time that it would take for an audience to understand what En-ROADS is about, to maybe combine a little bit of En-ROADS with a little bit of other stuff? It looks like you kind of did that in the presentation that you gave, but is that workable, or does it tend to be confusing when you do a presentation that has a lot of non-En-ROADS stuff included? I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I'm going to let Laura answer that too, but I will say that so far for me, when I have done it, I usually do it in the context of a health talk, and then I'll do a screenshot to make certain points of the En-ROADS here and there and put it in. I have not actually done an En-ROADS kind of workshop thing where you're really taking your time and exploring it, but I think it would be very interesting. I'm a little insecure to do it. But Laura, what is your experience?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of both, where I do a pure workshop where you take someone and kind of show them the basics, and then you set them free to find on their own. What does it take to get to 1.5? And then you compare solutions. I've done it that way. But I've also done, and I'm doing a lot lately. We did one on the En-ROADS Action Team last month, where it's taking En-ROADS and making it local. And a lot of it, actually, I learned from Lisa. Lisa's does a good job where you take little snippets of like your city and how, just like you were saying, like where does public transportation apply? And I would maybe show an EV bus. We did it on Nashville, I think, last month. And we took Nashville's EV buses and put them on there and showed the lever. Or we'll show a landmark building in Nashville with some solar panels and show that with the renewables lever. And I think that's way more effective in connecting with your audience. I've also done it with, let's say, the IRA, and like, what are the elements of the IRA? And then I'll point to the levers that would go with each of those things, like more renewables, certainly the EVs, efficiency in the homes, and kind of point to the IRA and where they would fit in En-ROADS. Again, I'm really hip right now on going local. Like if you could get pictures, I got pictures of the mayor of your locality, like planting a tree with afforestation. I mean, that's really great.
How much time is that taking you, Laura, to do these kind of
specialty
sessions?
You can do those because you're not really letting them explore as much. If you're doing like, I want to show you the IRA, you can do it definitely in 45 minutes to an hour. The workshops, you would really like 90 minutes at least to do a workshop. You can do it in less time. What if I do it in less time, I'll give them a lot of pre-work, make sure they've seen En-ROADS before they get into the session at least. And I'll send them the links and maybe some activities. Smart. Yeah.
That's really smart to do, to give it to them in advance and then have them come. That's cool.
It really doesn't spoil the show, because I remember the first time I saw En-ROADS and they were trying to get that global temperature down to 1.5. I was looking at so many things. I'm like, where are they talking about? Like, I never saw that big, huge number on the upper right, and it took me one or two times to really even process and see everything, because a lot is going on. And then you start going under the hood with those 3 buttons, and you can lose people pretty quick.
Gotcha. Lori.
Yeah, can you show the En-ROADS simulator back on the screen again? So my question is, the presets, when you open it up before you've messed around with it at all, are the presets, like, for example, coal, is it preset to predict the natural death of coal over the next 50 years as opposed to working on coal? What's the, because like right here,
a whole sheet on the parameters that go into each individual lever and what the assumptions are and how they go through it and all of that. I don't know that stuff off the top of my head. Laura, to what extent do you know that stuff off the top of your head?
Can you do one thing? Can you go back to the baseline, hit the little home button up there? I want to show you something. And hit the home next to that little arrow that you did, just to get it back to, right there. And then go under the 3 dots under the greenhouse gas net emissions graph, like at the top in that gray right there. And then hit the NDC button there. Okay, so that little dot says, that's the point we need to be if all the countries are meeting their nationally determined contributions, their promises. So what this says is if that blue line has to go there once it's implemented. So the baseline is where we are right now in time. This is not promises. This is just what's going on right now. And we assume business as usual going on infinitum. We don't think that's going to happen. We hope they're going to meet some of their promises, but it doesn't get counted in En-ROADS until they actually implement it in some sort of policy.
Right. Okay. So look at coal right now, and it says status quo, and it's, I don't know what 90% of the bar graph means, but is that predicting that coal is going to slowly die, whether or not we do anything?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, if you go under coal, what they're showing is there's a little dip and then it goes back up in terms of demand. So, I mean, not really. It's not really assuming that it's slowly dying. If business goes as usual, slight downtick in 2045, and then demand starts to continue back up. If we do nothing, if we just continue on as today.
Okay.
I think if you really want to get into the assumptions of it, you know, you need to, and I can try, or, you know, we can try to find you the assumptions, but I think it's pretty rigorously tested and thought through, and they've gone back and redone it a bunch of times. The only reason why I could guess that they're not projecting that it would phase out all by itself because of cost. It in part is population would continue to increase. Maybe that's one of the things.
Yeah, and I mean, just look at the demand in general. I mean, look at that colorful wedge chart up there.
This one right here.
Yeah, so you can see certainly renewables are overtaking all these other fossil fuels over time, just because our demand, and we know that like wind and solar are cheaper than these other sources at this point. So just by nature of economics and all that, and we don't contribute anything, coal is certainly moving slower than the other demand, but it's meeting some of that big demand that we have over up until 2100, just at a slower rate than maybe the renewables.
And sometimes it's, I think sometimes looking at the lines kind of also help. That's another way to look at it. Did that answer? I mean, I know it didn't fully answer your question, Lori, but
that's helpful. Thank you.
Cynthia?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, that was very illuminating, because I haven't really looked at En-ROADS in detail in quite a while either. And I'd forgotten that this was global. So I think it's really important to remember that, and it may skew some of the ways we look at it in this country in terms of what policies are most important. And I'm thinking back to the fact that I was kind of surprised when I first heard that, oh, transportation is the biggest source of emissions, at least for California. And I don't think you can see that from En-ROADS in it. So it also means maybe electrifying transportation is more important here and gets us more bang for the buck, because we, you know, in America, we drive a lot. If the rest of the world doesn't have that much transportation, it's going to look like it's not as big a deal as it is in this country. And I'm wondering if there's any way to get around that, if there are any US simulations of En-ROADS, at least in the big picture. Yeah, so I'd appreciate comments on that.
There are US models. I would say that and I actually played with one not too long ago, and I would say it's not user friendly. It's very cumbersome. It's not something you could really readily take to an audience. And what I explain to people is this is just to kind of this is a laboratory. It's not really the Earth. It's not really our globe. But what if we had an Earth that we could play with simulations, and what would happen? And so and what are the big players? But when you really get down to policy, of course, you're going to have to look at the regional levels. And there's lots of models that do that. Just not as audience, ready, I guess.
Thank you. And if I could just make a brief comment, people were talking about Texas earlier, and I've certainly been hearing that solar and battery and wind actually save Texas in the heat wave. We've always been taught that, oh, gas is the reliable one, and it's turning out that's not true. And as far as reliability, one of the things that's really being pushed here in California, there's a legislation has been introduced this year to try to make all EVs bidirectional charging, so that they can be used as battery storage on wheels, which I think is a really cool idea. And I don't know if that would change anything in En-ROADS, but I think it changes people's idea about, am I willing to take a risk on going electric when you have a lot of storage from your battery, and that you can actually use that to power your house in an emergency?
Yeah, I would use that, like they talk about co-benefits and things like that, and that would definitely be a co-benefit of an electrifying your vehicle.
You know, Michigan is really, really struggling with power outages. I mean, big time. And I think that's true for a lot of states. I think in part our grids are, you know, are just not, the interstate transmissions are not up to snuff and that sort of thing. And I always, you know, our little state org really have been working with a lot of other groups here in Michigan, emphasizing how, you know, reliable, affordable, clean energy is critical to health. So I think your point, Cynthia, about electric vehicles and making them, you know, they're not going to be affordable to everybody for quite some time, but for those of us that they are affordable for, you know, to it we can probably bring the price down by starting to buy them, and it is a nice backup.
I just had a conversation with a doctor not too long ago, and she's really spearheading solar panels on Habitat for Humanity homes. And
that's so cool.
And one of the things she talks about is, what about all those people with CPAC machines? You know, and your power goes out, and if you have a big battery on your car that's bi-directional, you know, that is absolutely a health issue. if your CPAC machine, you know, needs to be going in the middle of the night.
I think we have a nurse who's part of MICA who is also in first responder for FEMA for, you know, she went to the Paradise fire, and I bet she's in Maui. And she said when there's a power outage, the ERs call them electric emergencies. Maybe you guys all know this, and I'm just showing my ignorance. But anyhow, you know, often within a few minutes, to sometimes hours or whatever, the ER starts picking up, especially for people who are oxygen obviously dependent. But then, you know, there's issues for a whole host of other things, mobilization, dialysis, and the whole work. Cynthia, you probably can talk about that, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, right, dialysis is a big deal.
Yeah. And they also, just to your point, Cynthia, they actually do mention that under the renewables tab, more information. They say a co-benefit is renewables can help expand energy access during power outages. So that's so cool. That's put, you got it. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, let's see if I can find it here. Anyhow, so if we go to renewables, let's see. And then just to show you guys again how you find some of the stuff, let's see if I can find it. If you go to that little eye and then you pop it out, and you can go down to, is that under co-benefits? Potential co-benefits, renewables can expand energy access during power outages. You know this stuff, Laura, very, very well. That's great. So other questions that we can pose to Laura or anything? Oh, there's another one. Rob, Laura.
Yeah, Lisa or Laura, is and I know it's in there, I just haven't looked, the information on air pollution or air quality, that's based on outdoor air, I'm presuming. Is that correct?
It's PM 2.5, and I think it's outdoor, yeah.
Yeah, since we don't actually monitor indoor air, but I think that is a distinction that could come up just to make people aware, so you don't get trapped in a question on that.
Good point.
And underneath that, if you go to that graph, the PM 2.5, that's one where they actually have a hyperlink to the source where you can actually, I like it when they do that. They actually give you the paper where they got their information from. So if you bring up the, PM 2.5.
Just a guy.
Yeah, they've mixed those around too, if you've noticed.
Yeah, they changed that. And then where is it?
Then go under, that little arrow beside the air where it says on the left-hand side. Yeah, right there.
Right here?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So here's...
And then there's a hyperlink in blue to like the paper where they got their data.
Wow, that's great.
So if you really play with this, you can kind of find a lot more about the sources and what they're assuming and that sort of thing. Good. Thank you, Laura. Great question, Rob. And did you have another question, Cynthia? I kind of saw you start. And...
yeah, I do, but not if there's anybody else in the queue. So now I have to, so it's really more of a comment than a question, which is looking at that total sources of energy, which is back to what Lori was asking about, what happens to coal. And you're right, seeing the lines makes it a little easier. And you see that coal and gas and oil don't actually go. And what that really says is adding all these renewables doesn't decrease our energy usage. It's just adding to it. It's expanding it and making it cheaper. And people just either there are more people or the people we have are using more and more. And that's that idea of the carrots versus the stick. And the more carrots you give, the more carrots people are going to eat. And that's where the carbon price comes in. So it'd be kind of interesting to look again at what carbon pricing does with that and see how it shifts things, in terms of how much is getting more renewables, which is, I think, what we think of it as, versus how much is that finally lowers fossil fuel usage, and therefore the renewables can replace them instead of add to them.
But yeah, let's see. Let's look over here, and I'm not going to model the actual EICDA, which actually does better than this, gets to a much higher rate than this. But yeah, that's pretty impressive. And what's also interesting is how the air pollution comes down. And if you actually do model the EICDA, which again goes to a much higher temperature, you'll see that air pollution, if you compare that to electrification, energy efficiency, and all the rest, it's much more efficient and cleans up PM 2.5 way more quickly. I kind of looked at that very specifically, and I might be able to do that here if we looked at it. I don't know what I have open and don't at this point. I had a couple different things open that we were looking at, but let's see what this one is. Yeah, I can't do it off the top of my head. We probably could do it if we wanted to look at it though. We're right at 9:29. I'm sure people want to go, but if people want to stay, I'll stay and show you the PM 2.5 thing. We can play with it.
Lisa and Cynthia, this is Rob. I was just going to remind folks, it's hard for any of us to think of this as a global tool, but it is. And
right.
with that in mind, given that we have both India and China and many other countries still energy deficient and having to come up, without the infrastructure for renewables, there is still a demand for coal and natural gas for that reason. So, on a global scale, it's going to be a while, versus in the US, it can make quite a difference on some of these things. And, factoring those out is difficult.
Yeah, I think so.
This has been fantastic, but I think we need to stop and thank Lisa and Laura very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Especially Laura.
Thank you.
Good job. And really I really encourage you guys to hit some of the En-ROADS action team